The first light of the sun spilled over the rim of the valley, painting the mist in shades of gold and silver. In the shadow of towering trees and ancient ferns, a small band of early humans stepped cautiously into the open. Their faces, with primitive, ape-like contours, carried the wary expression of those who knew that each day was a battle for survival. They clutched their crude spears, carved from wood and hardened by fire, scanning the thickets for the slightest movement. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig could mean either the promise of food or the presence of death. The river's surface shimmered under the morning sun, a ribbon of life in a world where thirst could kill as swiftly as any predator. They knelt at the edge, scooping water into calloused hands, but their eyes never lingered too long on the rippling surface. Above, the shadows of great winged hunters passed over the current, vultures and eagles the size of nightmares, their reflections dancing across the water. One of the group stood watch, gripping his spear tightly, knowing that danger could descend from the sky as easily as it crept from the forest. They moved single file through the green cathedral of the forest, where shafts of sunlight pierced the canopy like golden spears. A mother held her child close, her primitive, ape-like face set in fierce determination. Ahead, a hunter swung a stone axe to part the undergrowth, each strike echoing through the trees. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the distant musk of unseen animals. In this place, every step was an act of faith, faith that the path forward did not lead into the jaws of a predator. The grass swayed violently, whispering the warning before the roar split the air. Out of the golden sea came the saber-toothed hunters, their eyes burning with hunger, fangs glinting like ivory daggers. The early humans, their ape-like faces contorted in alarm, raised their spears in a desperate wall of wood and courage. Dust erupted around them as the predators struck, claws raking the air, teeth snapping inches from flesh. In those heartbeats, there was no past or future, only the raw, savage moment between life and death. Night crept over the land like a dark tide, bringing with it the cries of the hunting beasts. At the cliff's edge, the band huddled close to a flickering fire, their faces, rough, primitive, and ape-like, lit by the trembling glow. Below, shadows prowled and circled, the low growls of unseen predators drifting upward. The fire was their shield, their fragile fortress against the darkness. Every spark that leapt skyward was a promise that they would endure, if only for one more night. They crept along the marsh's trembling edge, feet sinking into cool mud that swallowed sound like a secret. Their faces, with primitive, ape-like contours, were tight with concentration as a scout prodded the earth ahead, gauging where it would hold and where it would betray them. Dragonflies stitched the air with glassy wings while something unseen disturbed the water in slow, widening circles. The marsh smelled of rot and promise, a place where food could be found, and bodies could just as easily be lost. Every breath was measured, every glance purposeful, for in this world a misstep could end a bloodline. The warning was a whistle of wind, then the sky itself seemed to fall. Great raptors dove like thrown spears, talons extended, eyes cold with focus. The band erupted into motion, branches lifted, voices shattered the quiet. A mother threw a hide over her child and hunched her primitive, ape-like face into the dirt to make her body a wall. The birds circled and screamed, seeking weakness, tasting fear. Yet fear did not rule here, resolve did. They bellowed, they swung, and the predators lifted, thwarted for now, drifting upward like dark thoughts at dawn. The ravine was a broken jaw of the earth, teeth of stone waiting for a slip. They climbed anyway, fingers bleeding, toes searching, shoulders trembling. Primitive, ape-like faces set with stubborn purpose, they hauled a sling of scarce meat up the rough wall, spoils too precious to abandon to scavengers. Each pebble that skittered into the depths was a clock tick toward disaster. But above the lip was wind, and safety, and a horizon that promised one more night with full bellies. They climbed not for comfort, but for the story of tomorrow. The hunt stretched the day into a wire of pain. Breath rasped, ribs burned, legs pounded the cracked earth. They ran not faster than the antelope, but longer, trading speed for relentless will. Their primitive, ape-like faces glistened with sweat and grit, eyes locked to the rhythm of prey. Overhead, vultures traced patient circles, wagering on the inevitable. The sun pressed down like a hand on a drum. In this slow war, endurance was a weapon sharper than any spear, and they had learned to cut with it. The water, friendly moments before, became a mouth. It lunged with scaled muscle and ancient hunger, splitting the river's skin with a thrash. Spears flashed, stabbing the froth, while the current clutched at their knees. Primitive, ape-like faces twisted with battle cries and terror as the crocodile heaved closer, the world reduced to teeth, wood, and water. A spear found purchase. Another. The river reddened, then calmed. Silence followed, except for their trembling breaths and the far roll of thunder gathering the next trial. Rain stitched the night into a single wet sheet. Sparks hissed and died, leaving only a sulking ember that glowed like a stubborn heart. Beyond the grove, hyenas laughed, those broken, greedy voices gliding between the flashes. Primitive, ape-like faces leaned together, sharing warmth, breath mixing with steam. In the strobe of lightning, the animals appeared, low, patient, numbers on their side. But the ember endured, and with cupped hands and dry bark hoarded for such a moment, the ember became a flame, and the flame a wall. Morning brought craft. Stone kissed stone, sending flakes like sparks of intellect into the dust. An elder's hands moved with memory, twisting sinew, testing flex, setting a loop that would make the forest work for them. Primitive, ape-like faces gathered round, eyes lit with the flame of learning. Children mimicked, fumbling into skill, while their scruffy, half-tamed companion dozed and twitched at sense only he knew. Survival was not only muscle, it was method, repeated and refined until even the young carried its rhythm. Food hid everywhere and nowhere. Berries glowed like small suns, but sun could burn, and the thicket guarded its gifts with needles. A finger bled, a lesson marked in red. Primitive, ape-like faces weighed scent, color, the faint bitterness on the tongue that whispered not today. They learned the plant's language one taste at a time, storing knowledge the way others stored fat. In this world, wisdom was calories rescued from chance, and caution was the difference between medicine and memory's end. The scrub tore open and fury wore tusks. The boar slashed the air with a sound like splitting bark, ice hot, hooves drumming the soil. The band scattered, instincts snapping into place, one vaulted a log, another baited the beast, spears lowering to become teeth of wood. Primitive, ape-like faces were carved into focus, fear transmuted into precision. A feint, a lunge, a final thrust meeting the soft hinge behind the shoulder blade. The silence after felt like gratitude, raw and metallic on the tongue. They made time into food. Meat, thinned and salted by smoke, surrendered water to the sky and gained days in return. Bones yielded their secret honey to hammerstones, marrow lighting nerves like embers in winter. Primitive, ape-like faces softened in contentment for a rare moment as a lookout traced the horizon for lions. In this craft was defiance, to rob hunger of its favorite weapon, urgency, and to stack hours like logs against the storm to come. They borrowed the canyon's geometry, bending it into a partner. Scree rattled like rain on a drum, panicking hooves into the funnel. From the ledge, silhouettes awaited, still as carvings, spears balanced at the cusp of flight. Primitive, ape-like faces were masks of patience until the herd clustered, confused. Then the sky filled with wood and will. The canyon answered with echoes of impact, the air a chorus of triumph and sorrow for the life taken to preserve life. Night remade the world in ink and points of fire. Around their blaze, they traded the day for meaning, daubing ochre and ash into the shapes of beasts and courage on warm stone. Primitive, ape-like faces glowed with reflected flame as children leaned forward, eyes bright with more than light. Each line drawn was a bridge over fear, each word a tool as sharp as any blade. In story, they hunted the dark and made it kneel. The sea gnawed at the cliffs with endless teeth. Above, gulls made war on the air as a climber edged down on braided vines, hands and feet reading the rock. Primitive, ape-like faces watched, knuckles white around anchoring branches, bodies leaning back to counter the pull. The nest shone with pale ovals, calories wrapped in fragility. Risk traded for reward in a bargain as old as hunger. When the climber rose again, heavy with prizes, the band roared softly, joy tempered by the thunder of waves. Pain found them the way weather does, sudden, undeniable. Fangs wrote heat into flesh, and the world narrowed to pulse and breath. They worked quickly, a binding above the bite, a poultice of soot and chewed leaves, cool water at the lips. Primitive, ape-like faces gathered close, not to witness but to lend strength, a chorus of low reassurances in memory, what had helped before, what might help now. Outside, thunder rehearsed the next trial. Inside the circle, a life clung to the thread they braided together. The river had gone silent but not dead. They knelt in its ghost, reading cracks like a map, noses searching for coolness, ears pressed to earth for the whisper of seepage. Primitive, ape-like faces were pinched with thirst, yet disciplined, desperation guided hands, not panic. When damp sand finally kissed their fingers, relief spread like shade. They deepened the pit, letting the ground bleed its hidden gift. Survival was a conversation with the land, and today the land chose to answer. Across the grasses, reflections of themselves approached, strangers threaded with the same needs. Spears stayed down but near, eyes stayed soft but watchful. Primitive, ape-like faces arranged into neutral masks as dried meat was laid upon a stone like an idea. Wind combed the grass, carrying no words, and yet the terms were understood: share today, or fight and lose tomorrow. When the strangers mirrored the gesture, something fragile and powerful took root. Not friendship, possibility. Dusk blurred edges, and the lioness came from the seam between shadow and grass. The circle tightened instinctively, backs touching, firebrands snarling light into the coming night. One broke formation, on purpose, shouting, skittering sideways, becoming the louder, weaker thing the predator could not resist. Primitive, ape-like faces never lost sight of one another as the decoy danced with death. Then a rush, a burning arc, a chorus of roars human and not. The cat chose the dark, the band chose another sunrise. They honored the gone with the same care they gave the living. Stones spoke in a language without verbs, weight saying what mouths could not. A favorite tool, worn smooth by a known hand, rested on the chest of the quiet one. Primitive, ape-like faces tilted to the stars, breath fogging into brief ghosts. Grief here was not a weakness but a tether. To remember was to carry forward not just blood, but meaning. The ridge kept the secret, and the wind bore it into forever. The sky unstitched itself with light. They moved as one body, driving poles, lashing ribs, throwing hides over frames until the shelters looked like crouched beasts. Primitive, ape-like faces shone with rain and resolve as the first hard drops struck, small stones of water heralding the deluge. Inside the makeshift bellies of these homes, they waited out the storm, hands on knees, listening to the drumbeat above. Craft had outpaced chaos for a night. By morning, they would count what held and what must be taught again. The light returned as if it had never left, laying a warm hand on their scars. Below, the herds braided the land into living currents, and the river flashed its silver spine. Primitive, ape-like faces lifted, not in pride but in awareness, of hunger and harvest, of fear and fire, of all the small choices that had built a path across the teeth of the world. They had met night with flame, water with patience, beast with cunning, death with ritual, strangers with restraint. And so they stood at the edge of a day no one had ever lived before, ready to write their names in the dust again.